Welcome to Read and Revolt. This is our very first episode. It's a video podcast where we are going to read and discuss the books that are chosen by our shared shelf, which is a Goodreads group, and we're not actually affiliated with them. Any of our opinions expressed here are separate from that, but we are joining the conversation through a video podcast, and we hope that you'll join along. So they choose a book once every 2 months, and you have 2 months to read it. And for this period, they chose 2 books, and we chose one of them to read, which is Solita. So we've got 4 members here. Let me just introduce everybody.
Terri Scott.
Yep.
I'm an illustrator in Memphis.
So
Hi, Greg Bowler. I'm a professor of marketing at the University of Memphis.
Pam Saavedra. I also work for a local community college.
And I'm Rachel M. Taylor. I'm a filmmaker in Memphis. So, which is why we're filming this discussion. So we read the book. It was an interesting first book, I feel like, for the group, just because it is probably the hottest topic in the U.S. right now. It's a collection of stories about immigrants from Central America. The 3 countries they focus on were Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. But it's youth who have come over in the past several years who traveled through Mexico into the U.S. And crossed the border. And it's just a collection of their stories, their lives, what they've gone through. And so, yeah, it's several. I don't, how many stories was in it? Like 20, 25? 15, I didn't count. 15. Yeah, it felt like a lot. Well, where did everybody start with this subject? Like, how much did you know going into it?
I didn't know how bad it was in Central America and Mexico. Like, I didn't understand just like the scale of crime and like the influence that the Maras, like the gangs, had in Central America and Mexico. I just had no idea because they don't talk about that.
Right.
I just knew about kids being forced into camps and separated from their families.
I think I had a pretty good idea because, I follow the subject, but it's different when you hear somebody tell you their story because they're painting a picture of, this happened to me. This is, my life story. This is my family. This is, it's a real person. So it's different than some broad, this is what happening in a country that you've never set foot in. It's just put it in a different perspective.
For me, it was reliving kind of the tragedy of the 80s. Again, I'm older than you guys, and so what was, was the conversation back in the 80s was the disastrous U.S. policy that was going down in Central America. I mean, with Nicaragua and the civil wars that were happening down there, and the death squads and Iran-Contra and all of the things that we did. And it was kind of interesting reading this book because they noted that in the foreword there, is that everything that is happening today is directly traceable to what happened in the 80s. We caused this stuff. I mean, the gang situations that are happening down there, the horrific drug problem and the drug lords and drug gangs, and everything that is going on down there is directly traceable to U.S. actions stemming from the 1980s. And now we are seeing the results of this coming forward. So it was a couple of the people's stories that were in there were old enough to remember what was going on in the 80s. Yeah. I mean, they were small children back then, but they made note of, my mother was a survivor of the war. My mother was a survivor of, some of the death squads. And so they drew that connection pretty nicely in there. But, I mean, it was horrific. It was just harrowing, as I said before.
For me, going into it, we're hearing a lot on the news about this right now, but a lot of it is about kind of America's perception of like what's happening when the immigrants get over here. So I think it was really interesting to kind of hear where they're coming from, because that's the part that I didn't really know as much about. What were some of the things that you guys like kind of took from the book that you didn't know before?
Well, one of the things right off the bat is that, and I'm guilty of this as well, is that we think that everybody coming from Central America, automatically speaks Spanish.
Yeah, that was interesting.
No, in Guatemala, there are 21 Mayan languages, and those Mayan languages are also spoken in Honduras and in El Salvador, and as you go further on down, into Central America, down in Nicaragua and Panama. So, the assumption is well, everybody speaks Spanish, but so many of these people didn't speak Spanish. They had to learn Spanish
to fit in.
To get on their way
Yeah.
up to Mexico, to get over into our country, and also, believe it or not, to assimilate with the Hispanic community here in the United States. One of my PhD students many years ago is an immigrant from Africa. And as a matter of fact, she did her dissertation on this, which is the assimilation of immigrants into similar sort of ethnic groups here in the United States. And one of the things she found is that, native Kenyans, for instance, immigrating here to the United States have a great deal of difficulty assimilating into African American culture, which is very different from African culture.
Yeah.
And so these guys are experiencing the same thing. If they're coming up from Guatemala and they're really steeped in Mayan culture, then trying to assimilate with Mexican American heritage as well might be difficult for them.
Well, they talked about that too in the book. How a lot of the Mexican people were like kind of racist against like the Central Americans. And so, which, people in the U.S., they lump it all together and they don't realize the differences.
There was one statistic that I think it was before the 80s or the 90s, but that we didn't have this problem. That this migration that we see now was virtually non-existent. So, like he was saying earlier, that we created this.
Right.
This is our baby.
Yeah.
I have a 10-year-old. And so many of the stories were children, basically my kids' age,
And they were all children,
making this decision on their own.
Yeah.
Because we hear about like these migrant children or unaccompanied minors at the border, and I don't know. I guess I always assume it's kind of like they come here with the parents and they get separated. I just never really thought that these were like children making that decision on their own in their own country and saying like, I'm out of here.
Right.
And I'm gonna make it on my own over there. Like,
I mean,
these are
most of the
kids.
kids came alone.
Yeah, but this is a kid like my kid's age, and it's just like hard for me to make that connection that somebody that is like my kid's age would make that decision and make that trip.
Right.
Because my kid will survive going to the store by herself.
Right. I have an 8-year-old stepson, and one of those stories, I can't remember if he was like 7 or 8, but do you remember the boy? He actually left home at that age and decided to live on the streets and make it for himself. I was thinking about Mason during that, and I'm like, that child couldn't like walk down the street by himself.
Exactly.
Like, there's no way like he could get out there and like make it with the gangs, and that's what this boy was doing. So yeah, along that line, like it is shocking. Like these kids are doing things that we wouldn't ever imagine a lot of the kids we know doing.
Like I said before, I didn't realize how intense the Mara influence was in those countries, and the just uselessness of their police. Like it would take several days for them to respond to a call. Also, I think it was El Salvador that has like one of the highest femicide rates in the world. Just like the likeliness of them abandoning their children so they can travel to the U.S. to make money to send back to their children. Just a lot of child abandonment. But because of poverty, they needed money.
Yeah, a lot of the families were really separated, actually. Even in their own country, it seemed like a lot of the parents would have to leave their kids and leave them with the grandparents or with other relatives, and either come over to the U.S. to make money or whatever, or just make money there. Let's talk about the whole trip, because everybody kind of, they all had different experiences, but there was kind of a similar path that everybody seemed to take. We start in a country, we could just Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala. A lot of the conditions, we've got our, poverty, gangs. We have a lot of that.
Civil War.
Yeah, Civil War, the war for water.
Abuse.
There was just just a lot. Most everybody was like they were threatened they were going to die if they did not leave, or they were going to starve to death. And so their parents or somebody, they would have to get money to make this trip.
That's pretty much the only way they can get north is to hire a coyote. And I think I read this is a $7 billion industry at the moment.
Yeah.
Are these people that are navigating the migrants, up to the Mexican-U.S. border. But what's interesting is that what has now changed is that the coyotes are now working in cahoots with a Mexican drug gang called Los Zetas. And so once the coyotes bring them to the border, they have to pay additional protection money. Yeah. And once they pay the protection money, the coyote gives that to the drug gang, and then the drug gang will release the people, to cross the border. So it's become a very sophisticated, intricate drug and smuggling and super violent.
We're talking like $6,000 to $10,000 for a coyote.
Yeah,
and that's Central America, so that's very expensive for those countries.
But mind you, I mean, like, you're paying that money, and this is just for somebody to like
walk with you.
Yeah, sort of like tell you where to go and how not to get caught. But if you get caught or injured, something, you're on your own.
Yeah,
and half the time that was a risk too. Like they said that the coyotes were never a sure thing, and they could just up and leave them at any point. Yeah.
And this is to get you to the border, and
that's it. Like,
exactly.
I don't think they don't cross with you, right? Like I don't remember that case. Like they don't cross; they stay on the other side.
And if they catch you, immigration catch you, you're on your own. I mean, like, this is not certainty of anything. So what I'm trying to get at, you get so many people that why don't they come here legally, and it's like, who in their right mind, if they had an option of coming here legally, would choose to come here that way? That's the part that sometimes it just makes me so mad, because it's like, it's not cheap the way they're coming. They're risking their lives. They're risking so much. It's not an easy trip.
So let's talk about some of the things that happen on the trip. So one thing, they either go on foot, they can take a large vehicle, or La Bestia. Did anybody know what La Bestia was? I did not.
It's just the cargo trains,
Yeah.
I've heard about it before.
I had no idea.
It took me a while to figure out that they were on top.
Yeah, me too, actually, because they talk, like, different stories talk about, like, how they have to grab on.
Sometimes they'll ride on the side.
Yeah.
But the problem is,
they're literally hanging from the.
I hate to admit this, as a child, I would grab a cargo train with friends. It's incredibly dangerous.
It is.
Unbelievably dangerous to do that, because if you slip, you'll slip under the train and get run over. And a lot of these people, that's exactly what happens to them. I mean, look at the age of the kids. I mean, that are traveling. They're 14 to 16 years old. And it's easy to slip on those things, particularly because they're doing it at night and oftentimes in inclement weather, and they're being chased by, drug gangs. They're being shot at by these guys. Trying to catch a moving cargo train so that they can get further north. I mean, it's crazy.
I mean, just the description of them, it was horrifying. They talk about people losing limbs, imminent death. But again, like, they're risking so much of that just to come, and half the time they get caught and sent back. Because, I mean, the other thing people probably aren't thinking about is the fact that, like, they have to get through the Mexican border too. Like, they're not, it's not like they can just, like, hop over to Mexico and just be like, hey, I'm passing through, see ya. It's pretty bad. It's a pretty bad trip through Mexico,
It's like they're crossing, like, jungle and desert and
one girl,
everything in between.
She talked about how they were dying in the desert, her and her little sister, and then when she got caught by the immigration officers, she was just like, thank you, save me, like, because they were about to die in the desert, So, I mean, it's a bad trip.
Who was the last woman? She was pregnant at the age of 12.
That was rough.
And then another one right away. And so she was crossing the border at the age of 16 with a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old. And the coyote left her in the middle of the Rio Grande River, and that she had to swim across with 2 kids on her back, both of her daughters, and then she got stuck in the quicksand on the other side. This is, I mean, the strength and bravery of these people to get over and do what they did was just flabbergasting.
But that's how bad life is. And I think that's a big point of the book, like that, and I think this is what a lot of people in our country are probably missing, because we a lot of times see what's happening when they get here, but like, I mean, the fact that, like, they're children and they're being hunted by these gangs, like, I mean, most of them are going to literally die if they stay where they are. for them to take that kind of a journey and do all that stuff just to get here, and it's not great. It's honestly it's not great for them when they get here, and then I mean that's how bad it is for them back home though.
One of the things I think if more people would read a book like this, they would understand. I mean, there's a myth running around in certain quarters of our country that the people that are coming over here, the immigrants, are gang members. That's not true.
No.
The gang members are staying where they are.
They're chasing them over here.
It's the people that are running from the gang members that are coming over here. It's just the gangs aren't coming over here. They don't want to. They're perfectly fine where they are.
They're set up. They're good.
Yeah.
Or like the other myth, it's kind of like, why don't they stay where they are and make their country better? It's like, that's not an option because they're getting killed.
Right.
It's like, it doesn't work the way it works here. Kind of like, if you want to change it, like run for office, it's like, that's not an option there. It doesn't work that way.
Did that bother you? Did that surprise you? How much murder was in this book?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's getting killed.
Everybody was getting killed.
Like it was just a normal
family
day
members.
occurrence.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, my uncle got killed. Well, I guess that's it.
But the one boy, I think his father was a farmer, and the gangs were threatening to kill him, and they killed his younger brother, or older brother, one of the two. And the father wouldn't do anything about it, and he was like, "You should do something." And then they killed the father, of course, because what's he gonna do though? I mean, he's a farmer, like the police don't do anything; they can't help.
And so many of them, like some of them were like, I liked where I was living, like I had a good childhood, and then the gang came and they ruined it. And, but they even said, like if I had the option to go back, I would go back. I would love to go back. I want to become a doctor, and I want to go back and give vaccines to the children. So it's not. They're coming here because they have no choice. Mm-hmm. Because if they had a choice to stay there, they would. It's like, it's beautiful there. I love the mountains, I love the rivers and all the stuff. But it's you're gonna live there. I would die.
Right. Yeah, that struck me a lot in the book as well. Just how a lot of the kids were just like, I really want to go home. But they can't.
One of the boys toward the end of the book made this comment because he was in New York City, if you remember, and he was living and working there and sending money back to his family. And he made a comment that, you can't live very well here in the United States doing what he's doing.
Right.
But there's good work here. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't living high on a hog. He was living very sparsely and taking all the money and sending it back to his family.
I mean, that happened to a lot of people too, and even if they weren't sending it back to their family, a lot of them were having to. Their family had mortgaged their land. I don't know if it's mortgage. They had debt for their land. They had to
pay the coyotes.
Yeah, they had to pay the coyotes. So a lot of them had to work to pay for the trip to even be here.
Did you see what that interest rate was?
It was ridiculous.
15% a month.
And that one kid paid it off. He paid it off.
Loan sharks. Craziness.
There was one woman also that she met somebody here. And they were living together, about to get married, and she was talking about like how basically blessed she was, and that her fiance or whatever had a great job working basically from like early morning until night.
They go to bed, yeah.
And he was making like $1,500.
I remember that.
And they were like so like excited
so
about
happy.
it, and I was like, but they were like so thankful and excited that like. They were making it, and he's kind of like, he's being ripped off. This is not right. And after like taxes, it was like $1,000. But
the other thing that we haven't talked about is the amount of rape that the women go through getting over. Like I think at one point in the book they even talked about how
men too.
Yeah, and the men too. Like everybody's getting raped on the way over.
Gabriel was his name.
Yeah,
he was just raped constantly.
Right.
When he was
Oh,
that was the worst story I read.
That was definitely
it was hard to get through that one.
Well, how about the 9-year-old girl? This was the one that had the two kids. She was raped when she was 9.
I think in one of the essays at the end, it was kind of like, it's just a rite of passage. It's like everybody gets raped.
I don't think people realize, until you read a book like this, just it's relentless murder, mayhem, rape, deprivation. It's just constant that they're going through, and they're traveling at a minimum 2,000 miles through jungles and mountains and trying to hop on trains just to get to the border of the United States.
People are shooting at them, trying to kidnap them, taking all their money, robbing them, you name it, and they still make it here. And when they get here, all they have is like the hope that once they cross the border, life is going to be better here, and then they cross and they get taken by immigration and they're treating them worse. I mean, it's just...
Well, let's talk about some of the stories when they did cross the border. Okay, so like some of the strange similarities between the stories. The ham sandwich, the frozen ham sandwich, like that was in every single one.
Yeah.
Like that was strange. So every time that they were in one of these detention centers, they were given a frozen ham sandwich for a meal, and there was another instance
like a
where
crappy bean burrito.
yeah, a crappy bean burrito, and then a cookie and orange juice at 3 a.m.
They weren't allowed to use the restroom except for once a day.
right,
All
or
together
shower.
in the
Altogether,
same
yeah.
bathroom
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah.
But then they're also talking about how in the middle of the night they would make the temperatures like freezing, and then in the middle of the day they'd make it sweltering hot. And one woman said her child's lips were bleeding from it.
What's interesting, though, is that these stories are before our current government
Right.
by now
Yeah.
instituted the separation policies
Yeah.
and
Right.
ripping families apart and putting them in the deplorable conditions that they're putting them in. This is pre that,
Right.
so it's even worse now.
Yeah, and in the notes, like at the end, where it's like giving you research on these different aspects, they say like the government pays like $150 per person each day, yet they can't afford to give them a mattress or 3 meals a day.
Yeah.
Like, where is that money going?
I think it was during the Bush administration, if memory serves me well, that they wanted it to be, and it was kind of like a bullshit excuse, because it was like, we don't want you to make this like very dangerous journey. So when you get here, we're gonna make it so bad for you that you're not gonna want to make the journey.
Right.
But we're trying to make sure that you don't die and risk your life for it. It's like,
Thanks.
why don't you make the journey easier?
Right.
So that they don't die on the way over here, and you make it easier here. You know, it's kind of like you don't have to do it that way.
Right.
And then when it worked, it's kind of like, oh well, look, it's working. It's like, it's just like, yeah, the numbers were down.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, oh, we don't have that many crosses anymore, but they're still dying. They're just dying in their countries.
Yeah.
So
Because they can't make it.
exactly.
Well, it's getting harder too.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, that's one of the things that they don't really mention in the book, but I guess you could extrapolate that. You could get a good sense of how many people don't make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if these people could somehow survive what they survived, I mean, imagine all the people that weren't as fortunate as this.
Yeah.
I mean, the numbers just must be out of control.
I think
must
it was
be.
like the very first story that the girl said is like, there was an Asian girl that died in the desert, didn't make it. And I remember thinking, it's kind of like how many stories we don't hear because they don't make it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're hearing the story. These are the success stories, and they're harrowing. Like, how are the bad ones?
I think every success story, though, they did see somebody die, and they mentioned. I mean, almost everyone. Maybe not everyone, but I mean, if it wasn't from the train, it was from dehydration in the desert. I remember like one boy when they crossed. I think it was when they crossed the border through the river. It was a whole family, and the boy died.
Who is that? Who is the one woman who? It was her sister's birthday, and she said her sister's birthday present was that she wasn't killed today by the gangs.
Oh my gosh, I remember
When
that.
they were trying to cross. I think they were trying to cross the Guatemalan border into Mexico, and they were being pursued and attacked by these gang members. And so they were scattering, and they actually lost each other. I mean, the mother lost the daughter, and they lost the sister, and somehow they were going to meet at some place. And it was her sister's birthday, and she said her birthday present was that she wasn't murdered by the gang today.
Right. Well, were there any stories that particularly stuck out to everybody?
Definitely the story about the boy who was raped most of his life, like by his cousins, like his
Right, the bad
relatives.
cousins.
Right, and then like he tried to tell his mom and she wouldn't believe him. I thought it was
Yeah.
kind of like, just gave me chills when like as an adult when he's finally he sought asylum, he's in our country, and then he meets one of his cousins as an adult who assaulted him. And then later on he messages him, "Hey, do you remember what you did to me?" And he's like, "Yeah, I do remember." It's like that. Like, I can't imagine how much trauma these people have gone through and, like, just what they're working through. And I mean, they had to live with that for the rest of their lives.
For me, it was like that little boy, the one that joined the gang when he was like 6 years old.
That was a rough one.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like not so much that which was, shocking by itself, but it was like towards the very end, because it's like you think he's making improvement and he's gonna make it, and you find out that he died from an overdose. That one was just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Well, he went through so much too, and like I think he was in prison in the U.S. Like actual prison. Because I forgot why he was though.
They found out he was part of the gangs of Mexico, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you're in a gang, prison."
Right.
Yeah.
But he was the only one out of the whole book, I think, that had actually participated in a gang. Like everybody
Right.
else was like, I don't want to be part of this gang.
But even when he joined the gang, he was like pure survival, because it's like his family wanted to kill him.
He was a baby. I mean,
Yeah.
They took him
his
in.
aunt said to, I guess, his father, "Here, go kill that kid."
Yeah.
And gave him a pistol to go and shoot his own son because he was
And the father
worthless.
was going to.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
I forgot why he didn't.
I think it was his uncle.
Him.
His uncle
Yeah.
wanted to kill him.
Who intervened? Who was the one? Was it his
His
mother?
mom,
Okay.
yeah. So please don't kill him. And then, like, as he grew older, his uncle was like following him around town.
Trying to
He was
kill
like,
Still trying to
"This
kill him,
guy's still
right?
trying to kill me after all these years. Like, what's your deal?"
I mean, yeah, it's kind of no wonder that kid ended up in a gang. I
Right.
mean,
They were the ones who looked out for him. He saw them as protection.
Yeah.
As long as he did these favors for them. And I don't know if he actually killed anyone.
No,
I
he
think he
didn't.
just did
Well,
lots
no,
of
they
robberies.
wanted him to kill his family.
Yeah, and he couldn't do it.
Yeah, he couldn't do it, and that was when they were like, okay, well, you didn't do it, so we're going to kill you.
Yeah.
And that's when he was like, okay, well, I guess I have to leave. And then I think he had heard that some people were doing well over here, and so he came.
It's like his whole story, it's kind of like he had no choice, So it's like he come
Yeah.
over here and it's kind of like, oh no, you were in a gang, you go to prison. It's like, come on.
But he wasn't doing anything over here. He was just,
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was just like they found out that he had been in the gang when he was, living over there. And it's kind of like, no, you don't qualify. It's kind of like, give him a chance. I mean, like, put things into perspective. He was a kid.
He was 6 years old.
And he had no other choice. I mean, like, you cannot hold a kid accountable in those kind of circumstances.
Yeah.
Oh no! Like, and at the end, it's like you really think that he's starting to, like he's breaking from the trauma, and like he's doing therapy, and like he's exercising, and I mean, like he still had a lot of trauma. I was so hoping that it's like I want this to have a happy ending.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it didn't, and that was heartbreaking for me. I mean, like the other ones, like were heartbreaking, but they all have like, but now I'm doing better, like,
Right.
and I'm gonna go, like the one that you're talking about, he was like, I now have a boyfriend, and I'm in school, and I'm an advocate for you, LGBT
Yeah.
youth, and I'm gonna go to law school. It's kind of like, you're like,
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah,
That's awesome.
you
You have a
know,
happy
like,
ending.
you did
sort
all
of.
right.
yeah. And this one is like, I was hoping to have that ending, and it didn't happen, and it was like I had to like stop reading after that. It's kind of like I'm gonna have to put this down.
Yeah.
It's like people forget to empathize with
Yeah.
other people. Like, what if this person was your kid? What if your child somehow was abandoned on the street at 6 years old? Maybe you and your husband, wife, whatever, died, and your kid's abandoned on the street. Wouldn't you feel sympathy for that child? Yeah, you're like, I think there was like in the intro where they talked about a busload of children from Central America who went into like San Francisco or some California city, and they're protesters, adult protesters with signs saying "Go back to your country" to children.
We have a massive empathy problem in this country.
We do.
Yeah. I don't care where this child comes from; they're still a child.
People are in a bad habit of sitting back and looking at a situation as a whole. And I think the book is important, or books like this, because you're looking at an individual person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you look at an individual person's story, you start to identify with that person, and you're like, hey, what if that were me? And I think it changes the perspective. For me, I was already, leaning towards a certain perspective on it, but I definitely think it widened it, I think it really brings it home.
It's the whole function of the arts,
Yeah.
It's why people should read books, and they should go to watch plays and watch movies and see really, important TV programs that highlight, the suffering that these
Right.
people are going through, so that you can, you know, have some
Humanize them.
perspective and understand. And
But you know what? Sometimes you say you don't have to read the whole book. It's just a matter that you read the book and you're having lunch with your coworker, and it's like, hey, I read this book, and you know that happened to me today. Like I was talking to my coworker. It's like, hey, later on I'm gonna do this project for somebody who done it. She was like, what is it about? Well, let me tell you. And summarized like all the stories, you know. And she was kind of like, oh my god, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I don't think she's gonna read the book, but next time that she hears the story, she's gonna remember what I said.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and it's kind of like just word of mouth.
my poor wife
good
had
point.
to suffer for the last week as I was reading this book, because I would finish 2 stories, you know, and I'd go into this horrible depression, and then I'd start raging in the house.
Yeah.
And she's there, oh no, you know. It's
Yeah.
We have this culture that we reject everything that makes us feel uncomfortable. And that has to change. Because in reality, we create a lot of this discomfort. And we have to deal with it. We have to face it at some point.
Right.
Because we're creating it. And these people are uncomfortable because of things we have done. And if we cannot face it and make it better, then what the heck are we doing? If it makes you feel uncomfortable, then do something about it.
Right.
Because if it makes you feel uncomfortable, imagine how that person feels.
The golden rule is what we all learn as kids, but we
Right.
just forget when we grow up.
Even like, yeah, there is a reason why these people are coming here.
Yeah.
I mean, I come from Chile. Chile's not a bad country. We have all the same stuff that we have here, and probably, you know, like, I would argue some things are even better. When you're in another country, what you get from America and what America is, completely different.
Yeah.
Because we get the marketing, and we get the good stories, and what, you know, America sells to other countries, and what America is when you live here, completely different.
Yeah.
You don't hear about the Japanese internment camps. You don't hear about a lot of things. You know, it's like, I remember when I was growing up, you know, it's like what we got was like 90210, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, you know, like the idea that you have is kind of like this awesome country where everybody has a lot of fun, everybody dresses well, everybody, you know, is well educated because they're going to these awesome high schools and they're going to these awesome colleges, and like everything's great. And then you come here, it's like, wait, what?
Right.
And this is like what these people are getting, you know. So it's like within this marketing, you know, like it's the American dream wrapped up in. If you go over there, you know, it's like
Right.
this is there for you too, because America is also like the land of immigrants, and they tell you all the stories, you know, like you work hard, you can make it. They don't tell you the ugly part.
Right. The point of the show is to read and revolt or evolve, but you know, evolve
So
doesn't
we're
start with an R.
revolting after this, right?
Right, we're gonna revolt. We're gonna finish our wine. We're gonna go revolt. And I mean, I think we've talked about it a lot, but like, what's one thing that you're taking away with you that maybe your perspective changed a little bit?
I was kind of a little nervous to share my opinions, especially with family. And I feel like anyone who is against the safety of children coming into our country, I feel like I don't need to be afraid to tell them my opinion because I know my opinion's right. Just saying. I was like, if you're gonna like deny children safety in our own country, then you're just a terrible person. Why should I fear your opinion over mine?
I had heard the stories of the migration, and I had heard the stories of people, you know, suffering their way, you know, to get to the border, but from almost a distant kind of perspective, almost a clinical. It wasn't human like this is. This was, like I said, it took me the longest time to read this. I mean, I could normally read a book like that in about a day. It took me, you know, well
Dang,
over a
Greg.
week. But it was. I would read 2 stories and then just get terribly depressed and have to put it down.
Yeah.
You know, it was that harrowing and that gripping, and that just, you know, that human. A set of stories, and that was really important for me to, you know, connecting with these people and get that. It elevated my understanding of their experience to where it needs to be,
Yeah.
actually.
And it kind of like that's what brought home to me, in the sense that I'm a little bit of a guilt trip. It's like I need to be doing more,
Yeah.
and I know that. and I can rationalize, and some of them are legit, like I'm super busy, but I need to be doing more. I mean, like I need to put, basically my math and my money where all of this is, because it's like I know what I need to be doing, and like sometimes it's kind of like, I'm busy, I'm just gonna like give money to this charity and move on, and like my conscience is clean, and that's not enough. I could do more.
I think I was looking at it from a very distant perspective as well, and I have found myself looking at more people in my life or I come in contact with, and I wonder what did it take for you to get here? Like, I mean, were you one of these people? Did you have a story like this? It humanized it a lot for me as well, and I think that was important because, I think it'll change everything that I do moving forward, honestly. Yeah. So that is our first episode of Read and Revolt. I don't know if all the books are going to be this topical, but I think it was a good start. And the whole point of the book club, it's positivity. We just really, I think you could all agree, we all just want to grow in a good direction, positive. Enrichment and just doing good things in the world. And so that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this. We're not here to necessarily ruffle feathers. I think we probably will and did, but that's okay.
Happens. You have something bad to say, put it on Facebook where it belongs.
Right. I think that it's
no matter what you say, you're gonna ruffle feathers.
We're gonna ruffle feathers, and I think that we're all coming from a place of wanting genuine goodness in the world and doing something that is meaningful.
Exactly.
So maybe one of the other things that we could do, I'd like to challenge everybody. Why don't we all take our book and give it to somebody else to read instead of letting it collect dust in our bookshelves? Because, and I normally keep all my books, so that's a big sacrifice for me to say. But maybe this is one of those books that needs to actually be passed on. I'll challenge you, and I'll challenge all of you to read the book, even if you read a few stories at a time, because they are hard, and then pass it on, because reading is how I think we'll change the world.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that sincerely. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Pam, Greg, and Terri, for putting yourselves out there with this one.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so if you guys are interested in joining us, I don't know what book we'll be reading next, because our shared shelf will choose a book and we will just read whatever they choose, and it'll be amazing because we will read something that maybe we would not have otherwise picked up. So we will see you next time, and thank you for joining us.